being spiritually awakened early in your life can be like a double-edged sword. I didn't know this growing up. I had so many spiritual awakenings earlier in my life that I lived from this perspective of a higher spiritual knowing. And in a way, it happened to my detriment. I will explain why. And if you awakened early in your life and had a broader perspective of the world, a broader spiritual perspective, this may have affected you too, because it affects all of us who awakened early in our life. Hi, my name is Michelle Fondin. I'm an author and speaker. I'm the author of 12 published books, and this is the Michelle Fondin Author Vlog. This is episode number 24. I'm going to show you 2 books that are going to be represented this week, and that is Heal Yourself, A Return to Wholeness, the integration of body, mind, soul, and spirit, and my latest book, The 8 Limbs of Yoga for Modern Times, a practical guide to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. You can find these 2 published books on Amazon and Ingram Spark. If you're new to my channel, I want to welcome you here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing. If you're not yet subscribed, if spiritual stuff, self-love, relationships, being a spiritual being in a human body, if those topics interest you, then please do subscribe. Click on the bell, give the video a thumbs up. I am here for my vlog with my friends. They keep me lighthearted, Grogu, and 2 versions of Gudetama. Gudetama is a Sanrio character, in case you're wondering what it is. I've got Hawaiian Gudetama and 10-year anniversary Gudetama. And I am also here with my Grogu tumbler, with my Ticino Dandelion Caramel Nut tea, my absolute favorite herbal tea, which it tastes so good on this cold winter's day. Now, I can't really say cold winter's day because I live in Southern California, but it's been a little chilly for my taste here in SoCal. But it does not compare to maybe where you are living, if you're living in an actual state that has winter or a country that has winter. But I love the hot tea when I'm feeling a little cold. You know, before we start this topic, which I think will be of great interest to you if you clicked on the title, and I'd like to invite you, if you are interested, to participate in my upcoming book called Love Me Unconditionally, a spiritual guide to self-love. Here's what I'm doing. I'm asking some questions to 100 participants on what self-love means to them. So if you are interested in maybe having a quote in my book of your opinion of self-love, what it meant to you, what it means to you, what your view of self-love was when you were growing up, what it is now, then please email me at michellefondinauthor@gmail.com, and I will send you that questionnaire survey. There's a release form attached to it, but I would really like your opinion on what you believe self-love to be. Because it's not only my perspective, it's really what other people think self-love is. And so I'd like to get a more global view on this topic. You know what we're going to talk about today? We are going to talk about spiritual bypassing. Yes, I had no idea what that term meant about 4 years ago. So let me tell you, 4 years ago, I want to say it was about 4 years ago. So it was between the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. My sister was getting her certification to be an Akashic record reader. And while she was still in her course, I was one of her guinea pigs. So I got an Akashic record reading. And of course, I wanted to know about my twin flame situation at the time. And the word came up, or the two words came up, spiritual bypassing, that I was spiritually bypassing. And I had no idea what that even meant. I don't even think my sister knew what that meant. It just came through in that Akashic record reading. And so I may have paid attention to it at the time, not too much really. I kind of got the gist of what that might mean, but it really wasn't until I was doing more of my self-love work that I really dug deeper into this concept of spiritual bypassing. Now, I didn't look up the origins. I was preparing for the video, and the origin actually came to me. So spiritual bypassing, or the concept of it, was first coined, the term was coined by psychologist and author John Welwood in the 1980s. I believe it was around 1984. Now, I'm going to talk a lot deeper about his discovery of this in the teaching video that I will post later this week. But suffice it to say that it was coined by this man, John Welwood, and it became popularized by him. He practiced something called transpersonal psychology, which really combined Western psychology with Eastern philosophy. And that is what is called transpersonal psychology. So spiritual bypassing, and what this means to you, what it meant to me, and how I did it, and how I might still kind of do it. Let's talk about that, because spiritual bypassing really is using the concept of spirituality, the concept of seeing the bigger picture, to deny your feelings. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Spiritual bypassing is about using the bigger picture, spiritual concepts like love and light, like it's just karma, or it's just destiny, or it's just fate, or it's part of the grand plan, or part of the bigger picture, or it's all divine timing, divine planning, and using those words and concepts to downplay human emotions, especially the negative human emotions, right? So spiritual bypassing is like, I am going to the higher spiritual ground and maybe suppressing or denying real human feelings, either in myself or others. Now, I didn't do this so much for others, maybe in some circumstances, and I'll give you a couple of examples during the vlog, but it was more for myself. Now, again, I didn't know I was doing this. This is just the way I've always been, because I think I mentioned, I don't know which book it was, maybe it was The 8 Limbs of Yoga for Modern Times, but it was certainly in some videos on the Spiritual Awakening series, Awaken Your Spirit, that I have on this YouTube channel. But I mentioned that one of my earliest spiritual awakenings, which I believe, I don't know if it was an exact awakening, but I was 5. I was around 5 or 6. And so I remember being very, very open and spiritual very early on, but of course not really knowing what it was, not having a vocabulary for it. Now, for those of you that are into astrology, I am a Sagittarius sun. Sagittarians tend to be more open to spiritual concepts. I am also a Cancer rising, which is about deep, deep, deep emotions, right? Diving into the depths of emotions. I also have a bunch of planets in Scorpio, which is also about depth. So I really don't mind looking into broader spiritual concepts and even religious studies. Those are things that I really like looking at. So when it comes to human feelings, though, I've always had a more difficult time with that. And again, not aware of that really until more recently in my life, maybe the last 4 to 5 years, when I became really aware that I was spiritually bypassing my own feelings, my own negative feelings, and just equating it to more of, well, you know what, I can forgive this person because They're only human and really they don't know what they're doing and I just don't need to worry about it. Or maybe this person is really good on the inside, even if they're doing a bunch of terrible things on the human side, but this person's a really, really good person. Now, that's a really great way to look at the world, by the way. I'm not underplaying that looking at things from a spiritual perspective is a bad thing to do, because it's not a bad thing to do. It's a really great thing to do. And in fact, when you look at things from a higher perspective, a more spiritual perspective, it helps you develop that type of unconditional love and compassion that is really needed in this world. We need more of that and not less of it. But let me take you to a phrase that actually, I was thinking of this in the shower. I always get the best thoughts in the shower or when I'm driving. So I thought of this. So Jesus himself, Jesus of Nazareth, the founder, the unknowing founder of Christianity, right? He didn't know he was creating a religion. The unknowing founder of Christianity, Jesus himself, it is quoted in the Bible that Jesus said he is fully human and so fully man and fully God, right? Fully man and fully God. And I'm not sure where that's quoted, or maybe that's just what I was taught. Maybe that's what they preach in church, but Jesus is represented in Christianity as being fully man and fully God. Now, they go one step further in Christian teachings to say that Jesus is the only one who is fully man and fully God. But I would beg to differ knowing what I know now. Because we live in this world of duality and you are God incarnate, meaning you are a piece of God, right? A piece of God is still God, piece of the whole. And you are incarnated into a human body. And really that's what duality is, right? Duality is being in two places at once or having day and night, right? The division of that. But for humanity, it's really, we are fully human and we are fully God as well. So we are fully spirit and we are fully human. And it's really difficult to toggle between the two sides. And so when you are awakened really early in life and you have this recognition of spiritual concepts and you can see things from the grander scale, the bigger picture, then you have a tendency, most oftentimes, to deny your human half of yourself, right? The fully human half, for the more spiritual half. And that's why a lot of light workers, spiritually awakened people find themselves in abusive relationships, or they find themselves being manipulated by other humans because they put themselves in situations where instead of honoring their more human feelings, they look at the bigger picture. And so they are saying, this person really is a good person. I see their heart. I see that they're a good person. I see their divine light. I see that they are a loving person. But meanwhile, their human behavior is not good. It's not great. And so then the human person who is awakened is suffering as a result, but again, might be spiritually bypassing that suffering and explaining it away through spiritual terms. And that is where we get into some trouble. Because when you spiritually bypass, you create like a hole where that emotion goes and it is not fully healed. And so it can resurface at any time. And as it resurfaces, then you're left dealing with some really sticky muck and ugly stuff that you might not want to deal with. And so when I found out about my own spiritual bypassing, I realized that there were some childhood wounds that I had not yet addressed, notably with my mom. Now, I had figured by that time, the year 2020, 2021, that I had been through enough therapy, that I had dealt with my mommy issues, that I saw her for who she is, and that I forgave her for what had happened during my childhood. And that, she's never going to change. She's an adult. This is the way she is. I just have to accept her for who she is. And then when I was more awakened to this concept of spiritual bypassing and realizing that there was some inner child work that I still needed to do, that's when all the anger came up. That is when all the frustration came up. That is when those suppressed emotions that I thought I had dealt with and didn't deal with, because I was glossing over it with forgiveness. I was glossing over it with, she's really a good person, or this is just the way she is, or it's not my job to fix her, which is true, right? All of that is true. But in the end, I was just denying my own feelings about the situation, if that makes sense. So here is what could happen with spiritual bypassing is suppression of emotions, ignoring your emotions, glossing over them, just like I did, like totally glossed over my emotions. And then it becomes a festering wound that keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. And then one day you might be wondering why you're so depressed. And that is really why, because while you are fully a spiritual being, like you are, and if you awakened early like me, you always saw the bigger picture. You always saw people for their heart. You always saw people for their soul. You never really looked at people as if they were bad or wrong, or maybe even not good for you. You always saw the good in them. You always saw their full human potential. You always saw where their heart was at, not necessarily what was covering it up with that ego. But meanwhile, your fully human side was maybe still suffering the consequences of all of the things that were happening as a result of being human in those types of relationships. I'll give you one more example for me. And this, I don't know if this is right or wrong, or if it's fully healed. I'm not quite sure. I haven't figured this one out yet, with the exception of pets in the past. So meaning some cats that have passed away in my past. So with the exception of some of my pets, death has never really bothered me at all. Now, I'm not talking about looking at images of death or seeing shows or TV, movies or movies in general with death. That bothers me because I feel like a lot of times the way it's depicted is with a lot of violence. And violence does actually bother me. But death itself, the notion of death, like someone passing away, does not bother me. It has never bothered me. Meaning, if somebody dies, all right, they're going off to a better place. Like, it has never bothered me. So even when I was very young and I had grandparents that died, great-grandparents that died, a cousin that died, whatever, never has death bothered me at all. Never. I don't want to see the body because that kind of creeps me out. But like the fact that they're gone has never bothered me. It's always been like, all right, cool. Like, you know what? There is an afterlife. Their soul's around here somewhere. It's not a big deal. But in a way, that could be conceived of as spiritual bypassing. So even when my dad passed away, for example, I think I shed maybe one tear. Like, it didn't bother me. Yeah, I was a little sad, like when he actually crossed over, but I know that my dad is with me. Like, I know for certain that he is with me. I know that he shows up. I know that he shows up in my dreams. I know he's here. Like, he hasn't really gone anywhere. So I couldn't really cry. And it wasn't because I was denying my feelings. That's where I feel like I'm not really sure if this is actually spiritual bypassing or it's really living from the higher perspective. But let me tell you this, since that is my view of death, that it just does not bother me. Wayne Dyer always said, like, we don't choose our birth date. We actually do kind of choose our birth date, but we don't consciously choose our birth date, right? And so when babies are born, you don't sit there and say to the baby, why were you born this day? You should have never been born this day. But we do that when people die. Why are you dead this day? You weren't supposed to die this day, right? So we have these crazy notions about when someone's supposed to be born or when someone is supposed to die, right? And so I've let go of all those notions. Like, we don't know. No idea. It's not even our business to know anyway, right? Why a soul chooses to come into this life for weeks, days, months, years, decades, 100 years, 200 years, who knows? We haven't seen a human in our lifetimes, I think, that lived until 200 years, but we don't get to choose. Like, it's not us that choose when someone else decides to leave that body. So never bothered me. Still doesn't bother me. So like I said, when my dad passed away, I was like a little sad for a moment, but it wasn't like grief. I wasn't sobbing my eyes out or crying. I was just like, you know what? He's still here. He's right here. But I think spiritual bypassing can, with that example that I'm giving you guys, spiritual bypassing can be problematic when talking to other people if that is indeed what is occurring, right? So since my view of death is that, it doesn't make sense to me to mourn someone's death when they're right there. You might mourn their life, right? You might mourn like, oh, I remember we used to go to such and such place together or this restaurant together, and that like they're not there now. Yeah, that definitely could be a problem, right? But I always feel like when people get so dark and so deeply depressed because someone in their life has passed away, I feel like they're missing something. So it's like, why are you ruining your own life because this person decided to cross over? So that could be spiritual bypassing. I'm kind of curious what your opinion is on that, since I haven't quite figured that one out yet. If you have an opinion, put it in the comments section below. If you feel like I'm very cold-hearted because of that, put that in the comment section below. Because I don't think I am. I feel like I've made peace with death, even my own death. I don't care. Like, I feel like we choose our death, if that makes sense. I feel like if you feel like you have more work in this life to do and you choose to remain focused in this body, then you're going to stay here. And then one day you might wake up and be like, I don't think I really have anything to do here anymore. And then you're not focused in the body anymore. So that's really my belief. And that's something I overcame the fear of death really when I started listening to Wayne W. Dyer back in 2003. But even before that, it wasn't much of a concern for me. And really that's probably why it was so easy for me to have it make sense to me when I heard Your Sacred Self, or I read it, I think, Your Sacred Self by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And that's really when I was like, oh, death is like not a thing. It's actually not a thing. But before that, I was not so much concerned with that, if that makes sense. I was more concerned about not being there for my kids. I think that was more of the concern, was like, oh, if I die, then I'm not going to be there to see my kids grow up or have my kids have a mom. But other than that, I don't think it was really an issue for me. So, I mean, could that be spiritual bypassing? Maybe. I mean, maybe it could be. I don't know. For pets, it was really different for me, and I don't know why. Maybe that was before I really knew that your pets are kind of like with you on the other side, meaning like they're watching over you, and that pets also like reincarnate as your future pets. So there you go. So maybe that's that. Not really sure. So here's the thing about spiritual bypassing is that if you're not, this is what I really figured out. If you're not fully addressing your more negative emotions. So for me, like I said, when I was doing the inner child work, finally, after decades, doing my inner child work as it pertains to my family growing up, my parents' divorce, my upbringing with my mom, to some extent my dad, but really like I didn't have any issues with my dad, like really not until much, much later. There were some things that changed for him much later in my life, much later in his life. but I would say not for the first, 20, 30, 40 years of my life. But it was more doing the inner child work. And when I started doing that inner child work, I realized where I had buried and suppressed those negative emotions and then covered them up with spirituality, like covered it up with saying like, oh, it's okay, I forgive this person, but not really working through the emotions, right? It was suppressing the more negative emotions for a higher spiritual perspective. So what I believe is that I couldn't really be healed and I couldn't really love myself to the fullest extent while I was still harboring negative emotions, even though I didn't know I was harboring those negative emotions, but I was still harboring some negative emotions and not allowing my inner child to heal fully because I just glossed them over. I was like, it doesn't really matter. But it does matter that you allow those feelings to have a voice, even if it's just one day, right? It doesn't take much. We think that doing work for the past, our past, to heal the past, that we have to be very much invested in it. It has to be hard and laborious, and it's going to take a long time. And what I have truly discovered is that once you just give it a voice, it can heal pretty quickly, especially if you are where you're at today, meaning having knowledge of having had a spiritual awakening, having knowledge of things being different, having knowledge of your empowerment and being able to make different choices now. So it actually heals quite quickly. It's not like you have to just work through it and work through the mud, right? And, sometimes you can uncover those layers. And I spoke about this in a video a couple weeks ago, I think, when I spoke about attracting in emotionally unavailable partners. I'll post that here. But you can uncover layers that may show up a little bit later to be healed, of course. But once you recognize that maybe you have been spiritually bypassing, maybe you have been going like, oh, I see their heart. I see their good intentions. I see that they're a beautiful soul. Like that's a real good one that you're spiritually bypassing, right? I see that you're a beautiful soul. Meanwhile, the person's like destroying themselves with drugs and alcohol, or, they're driving like crazy, maybe going to kill somebody, or, because they have rage inside of them. But when you really face the fact that, you might be scared in a situation, or you might not be happy, or you might be depressed about a situation, even though you can't necessarily control it, but you can honor your feelings about it, right? You can at the same time hold space for yourself as a spiritual being and hold space for yourself as being a human being, right? The integration of mind, body, soul, and spirit, which I write about in both of those books that I mentioned, these two books, integration of body, mind, soul, and spirit, I'm having a hard time talking today, is honoring all the sides of you. It's not denying one of those sides, right? Even if it looks ugly, because you don't want to look at the negative emotions, right? You don't want to not forgive someone, for example, if you're really spiritually focused. You don't want to see them as a bad person, which inherently they're probably not a bad person, but they might be doing bad things. So that you shouldn't ignore, right? To your detriment, right? To your detriment. So really that is what I learned about spiritual bypassing. And now what I'm doing is I'm really trying to tune in more to my feelings in a given situation, because it is very easy for me. I am well trained in spiritual bypassing. I'm very, very well trained. And like I said, not all of it's bad, okay? Not all of it is bad. Some of it is actually good that you can do that. Seeing things from a broader perspective, a more spiritual perspective, compassionate and loving, unconditionally loving, that is really, really good that you can do that. And it's good that I can do that too. But when we are not allowing ourselves to be a whole person, that is when it's detrimental. So I'm working on it. I'm really working on honoring my more human feelings, especially the negative ones, especially as they arise, right? Like I am allowed to feel anger. I am allowed to feel stressed. I am allowed to feel disappointment. I'm allowed to feel depressed sometimes, although that doesn't happen quite so often anymore. See, when I was suppressing my emotions, that happened more often. But now that I'm acknowledging them, it doesn't happen like that. But if that is you, if you have found that you have also spiritually bypassed because it was easier to look at things from a spiritual perspective than to deal with icky, sticky human emotions, then this might help you to understand how to embrace both sides, your fully human side and your fully God side, right? That was not unique to Jesus. It wasn't. And in fact, so many things that Jesus said was that like, you can do everything that I have done and more, right? If you have the faith of a mustard seed, there is absolutely nothing that you can't do, that you can do, that you can't do. All things are possible for you if you have the faith of a mustard seed. We'll say it that way. So that is my message for today. Now, before you go, I want you to come closer to your device. Just come a little closer. I want you to remember you matter. You deserve love. You are loved. You are needed here. And you count. Your life matters. And the world is a much better place because you are in it. I want to thank you so much for joining me here today. Thank you for subscribing. If you're not yet subscribed, click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications. Thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. Thank you for sharing this with other spiritually awakened people who have a tendency to maybe ignore their feelings, because this could help. This perspective could help just a little, like it helped me. Thank you for your support of my work. You can purchase any of my 12 published books. Check out my website, michellefondinauthor.com. I have a lot of resources for those who are like you on the spiritually awakened path and the self-love path. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.